Test, test. Testing, testing. Hello? 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 Oh, echo. Test, test. Man. Well, that's fun. I sure did zap the heck out of my headphones, and I'm not sure if they are still functional. I might have literally static killed my brand new headphones. That's cool. That's cool. You know. Yeah. Anyway. But at least I can talk to you. Let's see. We've got Elgato virtual audio. Man. So, I have got some, static electricity issues that are going on in our house right now. It is really dry out, and, oh mama. Zap all kinds of things. Makes the monitors flicker. Apparently kills my headphones, which hopefully just simple reset will make that work again. But we'll find out, because those are some not cheap headphones that I just recently got. So hopefully those aren't dead. Anyway, boy. So the plan for today, today being a day that has been a bit wacky, and I am a bit tired. What we are going to do is, let's see, we're going to open a new window there. We're going to start by reading Young Goodman Brown, which is a wonderful classic story by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Yes. Goodman Brown text. Let's pull this up. Text. It's one of those stories that's big on what's the word? The word theme is in my head, but that's not what I'm actually thinking. It's big on atmosphere. There we go, right? And it's a very specific atmosphere that Hawthorne used quite a bit. Of course, it's set in Salem in the time of the the early 1600s, as he does with many of his stories because of his personal history with that place and time. But I adore the, what is this highlighted? Weird. Let's Huh? Not that one. That's not what we want to put on here. Why don't we see all properties? There we go. Okay. Boop. 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 There we go. Our text is alive. Why don't we do like this, and we can do a little cropping here to make it so it's not taking up our entire screen here. We can do like this. All right. And then we can spin this out a bit. Move ourselves a little over. Okay. There we go. Yes, excellent. Alrighty. So yeah, this is just like a, it's a literally what the word that I just said before. Not motif, not theme. Feeling, je ne sais quoi, tone, if you want to use that phrase. The tone, an ambiance that I actually like a lot. As far as a kind of spooky ambiance, I think Nathaniel Hawthorne hits the nail on the head every time. He's always just riding on that edge of the supernatural, right? And so, and anytime that I write anything that's vaguely supernatural-esque, it's always fun to sit in that almost what if, just on the edge of things sort of place. There's a parallel to the movie The Matrix. Fantastic movie, a lot of fun to watch. 1999, I think, or 2000. 99 or 2000, I can't remember. But the first half of that movie gets tone and mystery down perfectly to a T. Oh, it's beautiful. And then after I started explaining a lot of it, right, you kind of explain away the magic of it, and the latter half of the movie, I don't think quite hits the same the same buttons in the same way. But man, the first half of that movie is fantastic. Really until Neo gets taken out of the Matrix, which is maybe a third of the way in. It's somewhere a third to a half the way in. But when you don't know what the Matrix is, you don't know what's going on. There are people that seem to have these bizarre powers, or they can jump or fly or something. Time slows. You get this constant reference back to the Matrix without any knowledge of what it is. And it culminates with this amazing interview, essentially, between Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, and Morpheus, played by... Oh, who plays Morpheus? Matrix cast? Who plays Morpheus? Lawrence Fishburne plays Morpheus. Man, what a great... It's the blue pill, red pill theme that has been so horrifically abused by morons on the internet. But the original is great. It really is. And yeah, that whole first first section of it is just, oh, it's spot on. I love it so much. Um, but yeah. So the point being, tone, impression, feeling. It's something Hawthorne does a really good job with. It's something I've always wished I could tap into. Obviously, he was a master of it for more than I am. But yeah, it's a lot of fun as far as getting you into a certain mood. As again, the old je ne sais quoi. Anyway, so Young Goodman Brown is not a terribly long story. It seems longer here because the text's really large, but not a terribly long story, but I think captures the ambiance of 17th century New England or a mythicized version of 17th century New England in a wonderful way. So let's read it. Young Goodman Brown came forth at sunset onto the street of Salem Village, put his head back after crossing the threshold to exchange a parting kiss with his young wife, and Faith, as the wife was aptly named, thrust her own pretty head into the street, letting the wind play with the pink ribbons of her cap while she called to Goodman Brown. "Dearest heart," whispered she, softly and rather sadly, with her lips when her lips were close to his ear. "Prithee, put off your journey until sunrise, and sleep in your own bed tonight. A lone woman is troubled with such dreams and such thoughts she's afeard of herself sometimes. Pray, tarry with me this night, dear husband, of all nights of the year." "My love and my Faith," replied young Goodman Brown, "of all the nights of the year, this one night I must tarry away from thee. My journey, as thou callest, forth and back again, must needs be done twixt now and sunrise. What, my sweet pretty wife, dost thou doubt me already, and we but 3 months married? Then God bless you," said Faith with the pink ribbons, "and may you find all well when you come back." "Amen," cried Goodman Brown. "Say thy prayers, dear Faith, and go to bed at dusk, and no harm will come to thee." So they parted, and the young man perused his way until, being about to turn the corner by the meeting house, he looked back and saw the head of Faith still peeping after him with a melancholy air in spite of her pink ribbons. "Poor little Faith," thought he, for his heart smote him. "What a wretch am I to leave her on such an errand. She talks of dreams, too. Methought as she spoke there was trouble in her face, as if a dream has warned her of what work is to be done tonight. No, 'twould kill her to think it. Well, she's a blessed angel on earth, and after this one night I'll cling to her skirts and follow her to heaven." With this excellent resolve for the future, Goodman Brown felt himself justified in making more haste on his present evil purpose. He had taken a dreary road, darkened by all the gloomiest trees of the forest, which barely stood aside to let the narrow path creep through and closed immediately behind. It was all as lonely as can be, and there was this peculiarity in such solitude that the traveler knows not who may be concealed by the innumerable trunks and the thick boughs overhead. So with lonely footsteps he may yet be passing through an unseen multitude. "There may be a devilish Indian behind every tree," said Goodman Brown to himself, and he glanced fearfully behind him. He added, "What if the devil himself would be at my very elbow?" His head being turned back, he passed the crook of the road, and looking forward again, beheld the figure of a man in grave and decent attire, seated on the foot of an old tree. He rose at Goodman Brown's approach and walked onward side by side with him. "You are late, Goodman Brown," said he. "The clock of the Old South was striking as I came through Boston, and that is a full 15 minutes agone." "Faith, get me back a while," replied the young man with a tremor in his voice, caused by the sudden appearance of his companion, although not wholly unexpected. It was now deep dusk in the forest, and deepest in the part where those two were journeying. As nearly as could be discerned, the second traveler was about 50 years old, apparently the same rank of life as Goodman Brown, and wearing a considerable resemblance to him, although perhaps more in expression than features. Still, they might have been taken for father and son. And yet, though the elder person was as simply clad as the younger, and as simple in manner too, he had an indescribable air of one who knew the world, and who would not have felt abashed at the governor's table or in King William's court, were it possible that his affairs called him thither. But the only thing about him that could be fixed upon as remarkable was his staff, which bore the likeness of a great black snake, so curiously wrought that it might almost be seen to twist and wriggle itself like a living serpent. Of course, must have been an ocular deception, assisted by uncertain light. "Come, Goodman Brown," cried his fellow traveler. "This is a dull pace for the beginning of a journey. Take my staff if you are so soon weary." "Friend," said the other, exchanging his slow pace for a full stop, "having kept covenant by meeting thee here, it is my purpose now to return whence I came. I have scruples touching the matter thou wouldst of." "Sayest thou so?" replied he of the serpent, smiling apart. "Let us walk on, nonetheless, reasoning as we go, and if I convince thee not, thou shalt turn back. We are but a little way in the forest yet." Too far," exclaimed the good man, unconsciously resuming his walk. "My father never went into the woods on such an errand, nor his father before him. We've been a race of honest men and good Christians since the days of the martyrs, and shall I be the first in the name Brown that ever took this path and kept such company, thou wouldst say," observed the elder person, interpreting his pause. "Well said, Goodman Brown. I have been as well acquainted with your family as ever with a one among the Puritans, and that's no trifle to say. I helped your grandfather, the constable, when he lashed the Quaker woman so smartly through the streets of Salem. It was I that brought your father a pitch pine knot kindled at my own hearth to set fire to an Indian village in King Philip's War. They were my good friends both, and many a pleasant walk have we had on this path, and returned merrily after midnight. I would fain be friends with you for their sake." "If it be as thou sayest," replied Goodman Brown, "I marvel they never spoke of these matters, or verily I marvel not, seeing that the least rumor of this sort would have driven them from New England. We are people of prayer and good works to boot, and abide no such wickedness." "Oh, wickedness or not," said the traveler with the twisted staff, "I have a very general acquaintance here in New England. The deacons of many a church have drunk the communion wine with me. The selectmen of divers towns make me their chairman, and a majority of the great and general court are firm supporters of my interest. The governor and I, too, but these are state secrets." "Can this be so?" cried Goodman Brown, with a stare of amazement at his undisturbed companion. "Howbeit I have nothing to do with the governor and the council. They have their own ways, and are no rule for a simple husbandman like me. But were I to go on with thee, how should I meet the eye of that old man, our minister at Salem village? Oh, his voice would make me tremble both Sabbath day and lecture day." Thus far the elder traveler had listened with due gravity, but now he burst into a fit of irrepressible mirth, shaking himself so violently that his snake-like staff actually seemed to wriggle in sympathy. Shouted he again and again. Then composing himself, "Well, go on, Goodman Brown, go on. But prithee thee, don't kill me with laughing." "Well, then, to end the matter at once," said Goodman Brown, considerably nettled. "There is my wife, Faith. It would break her dear little heart, and I'd rather break my own." "Nay, if that be the case," answered the other, "e'en go thy ways, Goodman Brown. I would not for 20 old women like the one hobbling before us that Faith should come to any harm." As he spoke, he pointed his staff at a female figure on the path, in whom Goodman Brown recognized a very pious and exemplary dame who had taught him his catechism in youth, and was still his moral and spiritual adviser, jointly with the minister and Deacon Gookin. "A marvel, truly, that Goody Cloyce should be so far in the wilderness at nightfall," said he. But with your leave, friend, I shall cut through the woods until we have left this Christian woman behind. Being a stranger to you, she might ask whom I am consorting with and whither I was going. Be it so, said his fellow traveler, but take you the woods and let me keep the path. Accordingly, the young man turned aside, but took care to watch his companion, who advanced softly along the road until he had come within a staff length of the old dame. She, meanwhile, was making the best of her way with singular speed for so aged a woman, and mumbling some indistinct words, a prayer, doubtless, as she went. The traveler put forth his staff and touched her withered neck with what seemed to be the serpent's tail. "The devil!" screamed the pious old lady. "Then Goody Cloyce knows her old friend," observed the traveller, confronting her and leaning on his writhing stick. "Ah, forsooth is it your worship indeed," cried the old dame. "Yea, truly it is, and the very image of my old gossip, Goodman Brown, the grandfather of that silly fellow that now is. But would your worship believe it? My broomstick hath strangely disappeared, stolen, I suspect, by that unhanged witch, Goody Quarry, and that too when I was all anointed with the juice of smallage and cinquefoil and wolfsbane, mingled with fine wheat and the fat of a newborn babe," said the shape of old Goodman Brown. "Ah, your worship knows the recipe," cried the old lady, cackling aloud. "So, as I was saying, being all ready for the meeting and no horse to ride on, I made my mind to foot it, for they tell me this nice young man being taken into communion tonight. But now your good worship will lend me an arm, and we shall be there in a twinkling." "That can hardly be," answered her friend. "I may not spare you my arm, Goody Cloyce, but here is my staff, if you will." So saying, he threw it at her feet, where, perhaps, it assumed life, being one of the rods which its owner had formerly lent to the Egyptian magi. Of this fact, however, Goodman Brown could not take cognizance. He had cast his eyes in astonishment, and cast up his eyes in astonishment, and looking down again, beheld neither Goody Cloyce nor the serpentine staff, but his fellow traveller, alone, who waited for him as calmly as if nothing had happened. "That old woman taught me my catechism," said the young man, and there was a world of meaning in this simple comment. They continued to walk onward, while the elder traveller exhorted his companion to make good speed and persevere in the path, discoursing so aptly that his arguments seemed rather to spring up from the bosom of the auditor than to be suggested by himself. As they went, he plucked a simple branch of maple to serve as a walking stick, and began to strip it of the little twigs and boughs which were wet with evening dew. The moment his fingers touched them, they became strangely withered and dried up as if in a week's sunshine. Thus the pair proceeded at a good free pace until suddenly, in a gloomy hollow on the road, Goodman Brown sat himself down on the stump of a tree and refused to go any further. "Friend," said he stubbornly, "my mind is made up. Not another step will I budge on this errand. What if a wretched old woman do choose to go to the devil when I thought she was going to heaven? Is that any reason why I should quit my dear faith and go after her?" "You will think better of this by and by," said his acquaintance composedly. "Sit here, rest yourself a while, and when you feel like moving again, there's my staff to help you along." Without more words, he threw the companion his maple stick and was speedily out of sight, as if he had vanished into the deepening gloom. The young man sat a few moments by the roadside, applauding himself greatly and thinking with how clear a conscience he should go meet the minister in his morning walk, nor shrink from the eye of good old Deacon Gookin. And what calm sleep would be his that very night, which was to have been spent so wickedly, but so purely and sweetly now in the arms of faith. Amidst these pleasant and praiseworthy meditations, Goodman Brown heard the tramp of horses along the road, and deemed it advisable to conceal himself within the verge of the forest, conscious of the guilty purpose that had brought him thither, though now so happily turned from it. On came the hoof tramps and the voices of the riders, two grave old voices conversing soberly as they drew near. These mingled sounds appeared to pass along the road within a few yards of the young man's hiding place, but, owing doubtless to the depth of the gloom at that particular spot, neither traveller nor steeds were visible. Though their figures brushed the small boughs by the wayside, it could not be seen that they intercepted, even for a moment, the faint gleam from the strip of bright sky athwart which they must have passed. Goodman Brown alternately crouched and stood on tiptoe, pulling aside branches and thrusting forth his head as far as he durst without discerning so much as a shadow. It vexed him the more because he could have sworn, were such a thing possible, that he recognized the voices of the minister and Deacon Gookin, jogging along quietly as they were wont to do when bound to some ordination or ecclesiastical council, while yet within hearing one of the riders stopped to pluck a switch. Of the two, Reverend Sir, said the voice like the deacon, I had rather miss an ordination dinner than tonight's meeting. They tell me that some of our community are to be here from Falmouth and beyond, others from Connecticut and Rhode Island, besides several Indian powwows who, after their fashion, know almost as much devilry as the best of us. Moreover, there's a goodly young woman to be taken to communion. Mighty well, Deacon Gookin, replied the solemn old tones to the minister. Spur up or we shall be late. Nothing can be done, you know, until I get on the ground. The hoofs clattered again, and the voices, talking so strangely in the empty air, passed through the forest to where no church had ever been gathered or solitary Christian prayed. Whither, then, could these holy men be journeying so deep into the heathen wilderness? Young Goodman Brown caught hold of a tree for support, being ready to sink down on the ground, faint and overburdened with the heavy sickness of his heart. He looked up to the sky, doubting whether there really was a heaven above him. Yet there was a blue arch, and the stars brightening in it. With heaven above and faith below, I will yet stand firm against the devil, cried Goodman Brown. While he gazed upward into the deep arch of the firmament and had lifted his hands to pray, a cloud, though no wind was stirring, hurried across the zenith and hid the brightening stars. The blue sky was still visible, except directly overhead, where this black mass of cloud was sweeping swiftly northward. Aloft in the air, as if from the depths of the cloud, came a confused and doubtful sound of voices. Once the listener fancied he could distinguish the accents of the townspeople of his own, men and women, both pious and ungodly, many of whom he had met at the communion table and had seen others rioting at the tavern. Next moment, so indistinct were the sounds, he doubted whether he had heard aught but the murmur of the old forest, whispering without a wind. Then came a stronger swell of those familiar tones, heard daily in the sunshine of Salem village, but never until now from a cloud of night. There was one voice of a young woman uttering lamentations, yet with an uncertain sorrow, and entreating for some favor which perhaps it would grieve her to obtain, and all the unseen multitude, both saints and sinners, seemed to encourage her onward. Faith! Shouted Goodman Brown in a voice of agony and desperation, and the echoes of the forest, mocking him, cried, Faith! Faith! As if bewildered wretches were seeking her all throughout the wilderness. The cry of grief and rage and terror was yet piercing the night when the unhappy husband held his breath for a response. There was a scream, drowned immediately in a low murmur of voices, fading into a far-off laughter as the dark cloud swept away, leaving the clear and silent sky above Goodman Brown. But something fluttered lightly down through the air and caught on the branch of a tree. The young man seized it and beheld a pink ribbon. My faith is gone, cried he, after one stupefied moment. There is no good on earth, and sin is but a name. Come, devil, for to thee is this world given. And maddened with despair, so that he laughed loud and long, did Goodman Brown grasp his staff and set forth again at such a rate that he seemed to fly along the forest path rather than to walk or run. The road grew wilder and drearier and more faintly traced and vanished at length, leaving him in the heart of the dark wilderness, still rushing onward with the instinct that guides mortal men to evil. The whole forest was peopled with frightful sounds, the creaking of trees, the howling of wild beasts, the yell of Indians, while sometimes the wind tolled like a distant church bell, and sometimes gave a broad roar around the traveler, as if all of nature were laughing at him to scorn. But he was himself the chief horror of the scene, and shrank not from its other horrors. Ha ha! Roared Goodman Brown when the wind laughed at him. Let us hear which will laugh the loudest. Think not to frighten me with your devilry. Come witch, come wizard, come Indian powwow, come devil himself. And here comes Goodman Brown. You may as well fear him as he fear you. In truth, all through the haunted forest, there could be nothing more frightful than the figure of Goodman Brown. On he flew among the black pines, brandishing his staff with frenzied gestures, now giving vent to an inspiration of horrid blasphemy, now shouting forth such laughter as set all the echoes of the forest laughing like demons around him. The fiend in his own shape is less hideous than when he rages in the breast of man. Thus sped the demoniac on his course, still quivering among the trees. He saw a red light before him, as when the felled trunks and branches of a clearing have been set on fire and thrown up their lurid blaze against the sky at the hour of midnight. He paused in a lull of the tempest that had driven him onward, and heard the swell of what seemed to him rolling solemnly from a distance with the weight of many voices. He knew the tune. It was a familiar one in the choir of the village meeting house. The verse died heavily away and was lengthened by a chorus, not of human voices, but of all the sounds of the benighted wilderness pealing in awful harmony together. Goodman Brown cried out, and his cry was lost to his own ear by its unison with the cry of the desert. In the interval of silence, he stole forward until the light glared full upon his eyes. At one extremity of an open space, hemmed in by a dark wall of the forest, arose a rock, bearing some rude natural resemblance either to an altar or a pulpit, and surrounded by 4 blazing pines, their tops aflame, their stems untouched, like candles at an evening meeting. The mass of foliage that had overgrown the summit of the rock was all on fire, blazing high into the night and fitfully illuminating the whole field. Each pendant twig and leafy festoon was ablaze. As the red light rose and fell, a numerous congregation alternately shone forth and disappeared in shadow, and grew, as it were, out of the darkness, peopling the heart of the solitary wood at once. A grave and dark-clad company, quoth Goodman Brown. In truth, they were such. Among them, quivering to and fro between the gloom and splendor, appeared faces that would be seen the next day at the council board of the province, and others which, Sabbath after Sabbath, looked devoutly heavenward and benignly over the crowded pews from the holiest pulpits of the land. Some affirmed that the lady of the governor was there. At least there were high dames well known to her, and wives of honored husband, and widows, great multitude, and ancient maidens, all of excellent repute, and fair young girls who trembled lest their mothers should espy them. Either the sudden gleam of light flashing over the obscure field bedazzled Goodman Brown, or he recognized a score of the church members of Salem Village, famous for their especial sanctity. Good old Deacon Gookin had arrived, and waited at the skirts of that venerable saint, his revered pastor. But irreverently consorting with these grave, reputable, and pious people, these elders of the church, these chaste dames and dewy virgins, were men of dissolute lives and women of spotted fame, wretches given over to all the mean and filthy vice, and suspected even of horrid crimes. It was strange to see that good shrank not from wicked, nor were the sinners abashed by the saints. Scattered among their pale-faced enemies were Indian priests or powwows that had often scarred their native forests with more hideous incantations than any known to English witchcraft. But where is faith? Thought Goodman Brown, and as hope came to his heart, he trembled. Another verse of the hymn rose, a slow and mournful strain, such as the pious love, but joined to words which expressed all that our nature can conceive of sin, and darkly hinted at far more. Unfathomable to mere mortals is the lore of fiends. Verse after verse was sung, and still the chorus of the desert swelled between like the deepest tone of a mighty organ, and with the final plea of that dreadful anthem there came a sound as if the roaring wind, the rushing streams, the howling beasts, and every other voice of the concerted wilderness were mingling and according with the voice of guilty man in homage to the Prince of all. The four blazing pines threw up a loftier flame, and obscurely discovered shapes and visages of horror in the smoke wreaths above the impious assembly. At the same moment, the fire on the rock shot redly forth and formed a glowing arch above its base, where now appeared a figure. With reverence be it spoken, the figure bore no slight similitude, both in garb and manner, to some grave divine of the New England churches. "Bring forth the converts," cried a voice that echoed through the field and rolled into the forest. At the word, Goodman Brown stepped forth from the shadow of the trees and approached the congregation, with whom he felt a loathful brotherhood by sympathy of all that was wicked in his heart. He could have well nigh sworn that the shape of his own dead father beckoned him to advance, looking downward from the smoke wreath, while a woman with dim features of despair threw out her hand to warn him back. Was it his mother? But he had no power to retreat one step, nor resist, even in thought, when the minister and good old Deacon Gookin seized his arms and led him to the blazing rock. Thither also came the slender form of a veiled female, led by Goody Cloyce, that pious teacher of the catechism, and Martha Carrier, who had received the devil's promise to be a queen of hell. A rampant hag was she, and there stood the proselytes beneath the canopy of fire. "Welcome, my children," said the dark figure, "to the communion of your race. Ye have found thus young your nature and your destiny. My children, look behind you." They turned, and flashing forth, as it were, in a sheet of flame, the fiend worshippers were seen. The smile of welcome gleamed darkly on every visage. "There," resumed the sable form, "are all whom ye have reverenced from youth. Ye deem them holier than yourselves, and shrank from your own sin, contrasting it with the lives of righteousness and prayerful aspiration heavenward. Yet here are they all in my worshipping assembly. This night it shall be granted you to know their secret deeds, how hoary bearded elders of the church have whispered wanton words to the young maids of their households. How many a woman eager for widow's weeds have given her husband a drink at bedtime, let him sleep his last in her bosom. How beardless youths have made haste to inherit their father's wealth, and how fair damsels, blush not, sweet ones, have dug little graves in the garden, and bidden me the sole guest to an infant's funeral. By the sympathy of your human hearts for sin, ye shall scent out all places, whether in church, bedchamber, street, field, or forest, where crime has been committed, and shalt exult to behold the whole earth one stain of guilt, one mighty blood spot. For more than this, it shall be yours to penetrate from every bosom the deep mystery of sin, the fountain of all wicked arts, which inexhaustibly supplies more evil impulses than human power, than my power at its utmost can make manifest in deeds. And now, my children, look upon each other." They did so. By the blaze of the hell-kindled torches, the wretched man beheld his face, and the wife her husband, trembling before that unhallowed altar. "Lo, there ye stand, my children," said the figure in a deep and solemn tone, almost sad with its despairing awfulness, as if his once angelic nature could yet mourn our miserable race. "Depending upon one another's hearts, ye had hoped that virtue were not all a dream. Now ye are undeceived. Evil is the nature of mankind. Evil must be your only happiness. Welcome again, my children, to the communion of your race." "Welcome," repeated the fiend worshippers in one cry of despair and triumph. And there they stood, the only pair, as it seemed, who were yet hesitating on the verge of wickedness in this dark world. A basin was hollowed naturally in the rock. Did it contain water reddened by the lurid light, or was it blood, or perchance a liquid flame? Herein did the shape of evil dip his hand and prepare to lay his mark of baptism upon their foreheads, that they might be partakers of the mystery of sin, more conscious of the secret guilt of others, that both in deed and thought, than they could now be of their own. The husband cast one look at his pale wife, and faith at him. What polluted wretches would the next glance show them to each other, shuddering alike at what they disclosed and what they saw. Faith, faith, cried the husband, look upon heaven and resist the wicked one. Whether faith obeyed, he knew not. Hardly had he spoken when he found himself amid a calm night and solitude, listening to the roar of the wind which died heavily away in the forest. He staggered against the rock and felt it chill and damp, while a hanging twig that had been all afire sprinkled his cheek with the coldest dew. The next morning, young Goodman Brown came slowly into the street of Salem Village, staring around him like a bewildered man. The good old minister was taking his walk along the graveyard to get up an appetite for breakfast and meditate upon his sermon, and bestowed a blessing as he passed on Goodman Brown. He shrank from the venerable saint as if to avoid an anathema. Old Deacon Gookin was at domestic worship, and the holy words of his prayer were heard through open window. What god doth wizardry pray to? Quoth Goodman Brown. Goody Cloyce, that excellent old Christian, stood in the early sunshine at her own lattice, catechizing a little girl who had brought her a pint of morning milk. Goodman Brown snatched away the child as from the grasp of the fiend himself. Turning the corner by the meeting house, he spied the head of Faith with pink ribbons, gazing anxiously forth and bursting into such joy at the sight of him that she skipped along the street and almost kissed her husband before the whole village. But Goodman Brown looked sternly and sadly into her face and passed on without a greeting. Had Goodman Brown fallen asleep in the forest and only dreamed a wild dream of a witch meeting? Be it so, if you will, but alas, it was a dream of evil omen for young Goodman Brown, a stern, sad, and darkly meditative, distrustful, if not desperate man, did he become from the night of that fearful dream. On the Sabbath day, when the congregation were singing a holy psalm, he would not listen, because an anthem of sin rushed loudly upon his ear and drowned out all the blessed strain. When the minister spoke from the pulpit with a power and fervent eloquence, and with his hand on the open Bible of sacred truths of our religion, and of saint-like lives and triumphant deaths and the future bliss or misery unutterable, then did Goodman Brown turn pale, dreading lest the roof should thunder down upon the gray blasphemer and his hearers. Often, waking suddenly at midnight, he shrank from the bosom of faith. At the morning or eventide, when the family knelt down at prayer, he scowled and muttered to himself, gazed sternly at his wife, and turned away. And when he had lived long and was borne to his grave a hoary corpse, followed by Faith, an aged woman, and children and grandchildren, a goodly procession, besides his neighbors, not a few, they carved no hopeful verse upon his tombstone, for his dying hour was gloom. Yeah. It's so full of symbolism and it's so interesting, right? Because on the face of it, this story is such a, I don't know, it's so explicit. It's very much a what's the word I'm thinking? Not a fable, like a fairy tale kind of story, right? Everything's explicit and over the top and crazy. But at the same time, it's saying something a little more subtle as it's going through this, right? Because obviously, the undercurrents of what's going on, what it's trying to impart, is more interesting than just the craziness that's being explained here, right? This extreme of evil, right? Actually, I'm very curious. I'll have to look up. So there was a movie recently called The Witch by Robert Eggers. which is, I mean, it's kind of a horror movie, but it's The Witch Salem. What's the subtitle of it? Um, A New England Folktale. The Witch, A New England Folktale. And I am very sure that Robert Eggers, who directed it, wrote and directed it, was very immersed in this story, in this type of storytelling. It's a very similar kind of thing, right? It's a fairy tale. It's a folk tale, right? Where you have these this over the top villain, evil, literal devil, right? But I think what Hawthorne is more trying to get at is the taint in which doing something evil can have over the long term, right? And obviously you have faith as the wife, which doesn't necessarily have to be religious faith. There's almost an attack on religion itself that's built into this, which is interesting, right? Because on one hand, it's explicitly acknowledging the fact of, or it's siding with the fact of the Christian faith again and again within the story explicitly, right? It says it's using characters from the Christian faith in it, but it's attacking the falsity of the appearance of goodness and piety and these sorts of things, right? That not only is there this direct parallel in the witch meeting, right? But there's also the evil that's in everyone, right? That's all that happens when this. If you look at what the scheme of the devil, right? What is the devil gonna do? Let's see. Where is it? Where'd it go? All it's gonna do now ye are undeceived. Evil's the nature of mankind, right? There's a parallel to the knowledge of good and evil, right? That's all it's saying. The outcome of this whole devil ceremony, if were they to go through with it, is to see the evil within other people. Not something that's not there, but to see where is it? It says it shall be yours to penetrate in every bosom the deep mystery of sin, the fountain of the wicked arts, right? So that's it. That's all. And it's seeing the existence of evil in other people that destroys him. That's why he's a caricature, right? He's explicitly a caricature. He's Goodman Brown. He's this sort of as soon as he gains three dimensionality in any sort of way, it's destructive to him, right? And that's all that the devil's offering is kind of a realism to it. Take that for how you want it in terms of actual message, but I believe that's the message that's trying to get across, right? It's that if you are if you set yourself up to see the evil in others, it will make your life miserable. Essentially, is what it's that you can find evil in the best people, right? But seeing that does nothing but destroy yourself and gives you a life that's impossible to lead. Anyway, it's a great, to my mind, it's a great story. The other piece of it is, so I have to throw this out in there, right? Obviously, it uses the it's very it's oddly multicultural in that so obviously it uses the term Indian, which was the parlance at the time that Nathaniel Hawthorne was writing for Native Americans, but they are given no more villainous or good appearance than as any other, as anyone else, right? Everyone is equal. Mankind is purely on a level in this story, right? They can be I that brought the pitch not kindled at my own hearth to set fire to an Indian village in King Philip's War. They can be the victims of evil. They can be the perpetrators of evil, just as everyone else can be the victim and perpetrators of evil, right? And so, I will say that despite the verbiage the outdated verbiage that's used, that is actually it's humanizing in that sense. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. It's a fun story. It again, in being a folk tale and being a fairy tale, right? It leans very explicitly into symbolism, religious symbolism. Obviously, it's it's also, so the other part that it's trying to point out is that, of course, these were the pious Puritans that were the perpetrators of the witch trials. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's a lot of what it's trying to say. It's the conflict goodness. Also, this free will seems to have disappeared in each character except for the hint of choice. Yeah, you're right. For all his protestation, the only time that you have a choice is on that razor's edge of walking in the forest but not yet getting there, right? That's it. If you get there, even if you don't follow through in the end with the ceremony, it doesn't matter, right? Your fate is sealed. Your dying hour is gloom. Doesn't matter. Before that, you're stuck in the puritanical world that so strongly had the evil that hid the evils, right? That's the thing. The puritanical world isn't a world without evil. It's a world that hides evil. And that's the criticism of religion that's in here, right? It's the religion that hides evil, the evil actions that are undertaken in its name and things like that, right? That's the criticism of the puritanical religion that takes place here, right? It's making an equivalence between the two religious modalities, right? The evil devil religion and the Christian religion of the people in Salem. But of course, again, what's Salem known for? It's known for those witch trials, and Hawthorne. The fact that Hawthorne had such a guilt complex about his ancestor being a judge at the witch trials, informed this strongly. So he is certainly not towing the puritanical line, if you will. when it comes to this, despite how it might appear at first blush if you just were to read this naively. And so and there are points of the subtlety there. But it gives kind of a bleak, talking about that idea of free will and the ability to have agency. It gives kind of a bleak outlook on the very concept of agency, right? Because if the only chance you have is that one razor's edge, the one trip where you have the opportunity to have agency, that's it. That's what you get. Until you follow one baptism or the other, you have the one chance to have agency. But even abiding by that, your only choice is between the puritanical Salem village that with all of its what's it called, all of the false two-facedness that's occurring there, or this absolute see the evil in all places and it destroys your life, right? That's your choice. That's it. That's what you get. And so I think that's very interesting that it's interesting because that's not, you don't see, or at least to my mind, when I've read other works by Nathaniel Hawthorne, you don't see that sort of stark contrast, even when he leans into some of the same motifs, like in House of the Seven Gables. It's, you don't quite see some of the, it doesn't appear to be so black and white, and I might be or poorly analyzing it, but to my mind, that's what pops out when I see this story. It is a fun story. It is a very interesting story. I am interested. A while ago, I wrote maybe a paragraph, but I'd love to extend it, I think, a little at some point. This was years and years ago. I'd love to see the devil figure, right, in a story where he's less this two-dimensional devil figure, to give him a more Miltonian three-dimensional figure for what happens when he, is there an equivalence if this devil figure were to exist for longer? Could there be an equivalent decision choice for him that would be different in the future? I don't know. It'd be an interesting thing to explore. Maybe referencing also the marriage of heaven and hell and a few other kind of things would be cool. Anyway, that was Young Goodman Brown. So what time is it? We have been going for a little over an hour. Yeah. Right? Milton's Conflicted Satan would be a very interesting mashup with the Satan of Young Goodman Brown. I think that would be a very interesting character study. Even set in sort of a modern time. It could be cool. And you've seen, all right, there have been, of course, other versions of the character in various shades of good, bad, and in between. It's always kind of a fun character to explore because of the extremes to which you can take it on all sides, and just because of the cultural zeitgeist understanding of it. Yeah, so that's, I might come back to that at some point. That'd be kind of a fun one to do. Not 100% sure how I'd go about it. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so I've been saying we've been going for about an hour. Um, so what I'm going to do is refresh my tea. Um, come back here, and I think I'll do one more short story. Keeping in the theme, maybe something by Poe. Uh, something short by Poe, I think would be fun. Um, but yeah, I will be back in a moment. So enjoy some airplanes flying around and some music, and we'll be back. Oh, my audio is messed up. You got no music. I apologize for that. Well, oopsies. Oopsie daisy. I never claimed to be good at this whole streaming thing. All right. So I think what we should do is let's go take a look at what am I thinking? On short stories. Let's select one, shall we? Oh, all right. Yes, there we go. The Poe Museum. There we are. The Cask of Amontillado. Amontillado. That actually might be a good one. I think I've done that one already on stream. Can't remember. Anyway. Murder of Everett Mork, one of the original detective stories. Replete with twist ending. And some words with a mummy. The Telltale Heart is a fun sort of... It's not too long. We can do the Telltale Heart. It's a... chew the scenery kind of tale. Oh, let me update. The Telltale. Two L's in there. Heart. Blam. Update streams. Oops. Let me make sure that that actually did the thing that I wanted it to do. That one updated. That one didn't update. Weird. Okay, well, it's fine. For some reason, Twitch works a lot better than YouTube for the streams. Anyway. Okay. So let's chew us some furniture. Let's get a little wacky with a Telltale Heart. Because really that's what it's good for. Will I be going over the top? Maybe. It's a kind of story. Anyway. Okay. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I had been and am, but why will you say I am mad? Disease has sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was a sense of hearing acute. I heard all things to heaven and the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then will you say I am mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad? Madmen know nothing. You should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, and with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to my work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I might see him as he lay upon the bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well into the room, I undid the lantern. Cautiously, oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man that vexed me, but this evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into his chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had passed the night. So, you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night at 12 I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. Watch his minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I had fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now, you might think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch, with thick darkness, for the shutters were closed fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door. And I kept pushing it steadily. I had my head in, was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening. The old man sprung up in the bed and cried, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. And in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan. I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no, it was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it had welled from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned in the bed. His fears had ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "Nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket upon which made a single chirp. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with all these suppositions, but he had found them all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him, enveloped the victim, and it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length, a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones, but I couldn't see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon the damned spot. And now have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too, was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum simulates a soldier to courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meanwhile, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased, grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder, every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dread hour of the night, amidst the dreadful silence of the old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once, only once. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs, and I then took up 3 planks of flooring from the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to watch out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. When I made an end to these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek might have been heard by a neighbor during the night. A suspicion of foul play had been aroused. The information had been logged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputized to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek I said was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things, but ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with heightened voice, yet the sound increased. What could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, such as the sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor and to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited by fury by the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh, God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the floors, but the noise arose over all and continually increased, grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard it not? Almighty God. No, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear these hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt I must scream or die. And now again, hark, louder, louder, louder. Villains, I shrieked, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, is the beating of his hideous heart. Hooray! The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, otherwise known as Crazy, the story. Yeah, right. Yeah, this is not this is not fun electro swing jazz. This is pure insanity distilled. What a fun little story. I enjoy this story. It's not very deep, but it's certainly fun. And if you do it in any way like chewing up scenery, this is really the thing to do. It's not very long. It's, you know, just a lot of fun. Well, thank you to everyone who joined me for today's readings of Insanity. So next, I'm trying to think when the next time I will be able to stream is. Probably not tomorrow. Perhaps Wednesday. Wednesday might be a good day. We'll see. I do have to catch back up with some math, so we will continue our efforts of implementing the Kalman filter in the least intuitive and most overly complicated way imaginable. I think that will be our next move. Otherwise, yeah, I think I'm going to end this here. I might come back later tonight to play some games, but I think for for the literary portion of the evening, I think this is the end. I do wish you all adieu. No. Have a good evening. I'll see you guys on the next stream. And until next time, have a good one.